Hello, night wanderers, and welcome to Crowvane Manor, where old walls hold forgotten secrets and a calm voice guides you gently into sleep. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Leave your city, state, or country in the comments below. It's always wonderful to see how far the stories of Crowvane Manor travel. Just a quick note before we enter the darkness. You may hear a few short ads during the first 10 minutes. After that, the rest of the video will be completely ad-free. No more interruptions. Just you, the quiet night, and the stories waiting inside the manor. Now settle into bed, close your eyes, and let the worries of the day slowly fade away. If you enjoy peaceful nights filled with mystery, please like the video, subscribe to Crowvane Manor, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. The doors are open. Come inside and let tonight's journey begin. Whenever my parents visit, the house changes. That is the first thing I notice. The rooms feel warmer. The silence feels less heavy. Even the hallway seems brighter somehow, as if the sound of their voices is enough to push the darkness back into the corners. I can hear them before I properly see them. My father's familiar rhythm when he talks. My mother's softer voice answering him. The little pauses between their words that I know better than I know my own breathing. For those moments, the house feels alive again. Safe, full, and every single time they arrive, the same thing happens. The front door opens. They step through. And something slips in behind them. I only ever see it from the corner of my eye. A quick blur close to the floor. Dark, low, fast, like a cat squeezing through the gap before the heavy front door swings shut. The first few times, I thought that was exactly what it was. A stray cat. Maybe one had been hanging around outside. Maybe it rushed in whenever the door opened because it wanted warmth or food. That made sense. What didn't make sense was that I could never find it afterward. I would check beneath furniture, behind curtains, under beds, inside closets. Nothing, no fur, no paw prints, no sound, no overturned objects. Nothing a real cat should leave behind. Eventually, I stopped looking. That probably sounds strange, but death is not new to me. Grief is not new to me either, after enough loss. You become good at putting impossible things into separate compartments in your mind. You tell yourself you'll deal with them later. You focus on what you can handle. So instead of worrying about the shadow slipping through the doorway, I concentrated on my parents. I listened to them. I sat with them. I laughed with them. I tried to enjoy every second they were there, because some part of me always knew the visit wouldn't last. The truth usually returned at night. That was when the house stopped feeling warm. I have several routines before I sleep. Some people might call them strange. I call them necessary. There are rows of warm string lights around my bedroom, not bright enough to keep me awake, but enough that the room never becomes completely dark. I keep curtains layered over the windows. My bedroom door stays open. My children's bedroom doors stay open too. I need to be able to hear them, see them if I get up. Know that nothing has placed itself between me and their rooms. There is also a large mirror in my bedroom. I hate it. I didn't always hate mirrors. I don't believe every old superstition about them. I don't cover it with a sheet, because I've always thought that was the kind of thing people did in horror movies to make themselves feel better. A piece of fabric doesn't change what glass is. It doesn't change what might be reflected in it. So instead, I position the mirror to my right. If I lie normally in bed, I don't face it. I don't look at it at night. I don't acknowledge it. That has become another rule. But whatever is happening in my room doesn't begin with the mirror. It begins with the mattress. Usually it happens just as I'm drifting off. There's a point where my body becomes heavy, but my thoughts are still moving. I'm not fully asleep, not fully awake. That's when I feel it. Thump, a small weight lands near the edge of the bed. Then another. 4 light steps. Pause. There is no other way I can describe the sensation. Something the size of a cat climbs onto my mattress. The duvet depresses beneath its weight. 1 step, then another. Slow, careful, coming toward me. The first few times it happened, I reacted without thinking. Adrenaline shot through me. I threw my hand across the mattress, hard, sweeping through the blankets, trying to hit fur, trying to touch something solid. Anything I wanted proof. A normal animal would have been terrifying for maybe 1 second and comforting immediately afterward. A cat. Just a cat. I would have grabbed it, opened the door, put it outside, and laughed at myself. But my palm only ever struck blankets. Empty blankets. No body, no fur, nothing. And yet the weight remained. Sometimes it moved around my hand. Sometimes I felt another little depression behind my legs. The mattress would shift. The duvet would pull slightly. Then the air in the room changed. There is a difference between ordinary cold and the kind of cold I'm talking about. Ordinary cold comes from somewhere. A window, a vent, a draft beneath a door. This cold doesn't move through the room. It appears. One moment the bedroom is warm. The next, there's something in it that shouldn't be there. I feel it before I see anything. The hairs on my arms rise. My chest tightens. My breathing becomes shallow. And in the soft glow from the string lights, I sometimes notice movement. Not a figure exactly. More like an area where the warm light stops behaving normally. A separate shadow. Something that doesn't belong to any object. It moves at the edge of my vision. Whenever I try to look directly at it, there's nothing there. The same feeling follows me into my children's rooms. That is the part that frightens me more than anything else. I have walked into their rooms in the middle of the night and found them sitting upright, completely upright, eyes open, staring toward the doorway. At first, I thought they were awake. I would whisper their names. Nothing, I'd move closer. Still nothing. Then I realized they were asleep, deeply asleep. Eyes open, bodies sitting straight up, looking toward an empty doorway. Sometimes their heads moved slightly, as if following something crossing the hall. I never woke them roughly. I would guide them back down, pull the blankets over them, stand there until their breathing became steady again. Then I would return to my room and keep every door open. Those nights made me feel like our house contained another kind of awareness, something running parallel to ours. We slept. It remained awake. We looked into a room and saw empty space. It saw whatever occupied that space. Or maybe the opposite was true. Maybe our children could see something while sleeping that adults trained themselves not to notice. I tried not to think about that. Then the dreams started making more sense. Whenever my parents visit, eventually I wake. And when I wake, I remember. They're dead. Both of them. They have been dead. There is no car outside. No coats hanging by the door. No cups left on the table. No voices traveling through the hallway. The visits are dreams. Beautiful ones. Cruel ones. Sometimes they feel so real that waking is like losing them all over again. In those dreams, we talk. Not about anything important. That's what makes them hurt. My mother asks how I'm doing. My father makes comments about the house. We laugh about things only our family would understand. Sometimes they sit with the children. Sometimes we eat together. Sometimes we're simply standing in the hallway, talking while sunlight comes through the windows. There is no dramatic goodbye, no message from beyond death. They're just there, alive, normal, and then I wake. The room is dark except for the string lights. My face is wet. My chest hurts, and the mattress moves. Thump. That was when I began connecting the two things, the visits and the cat. Every time my parents crossed the doorway in those dreams, something came through behind them. A little dark blur. I had treated it like an unimportant detail because I wanted the rest of the dream too badly. I wanted my parents. I didn't want to question how they got there. I didn't want to ask what kind of door had opened. But maybe grief isn't the only thing that travels both ways. Maybe when they come close enough for me to see them again, the boundary opens. Not much. Not for long. Just a fraction. A thin crack between whatever separates us. My parents come through because they love me. And something else follows. Something small enough to slip behind them before the door closes. That's what I think the cat is. Not an animal. An intrusion. A passenger. Something that uses their presence as cover. That realization changed the dreams. I started noticing the doorway more. Whenever my parents arrived, I watched their feet. My mother would enter first sometimes, my father behind her. Then the blur. Always low, always quick, always just outside direct sight. I tried telling them about it in one dream. I remember looking at my mother and saying, "Something comes in with you." Her expression changed. That's all. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't laugh. She looked toward the floor near the doorway. Then I woke. The mattress dipped beside my feet. I didn't sleep again that night. After that, the activity became worse. Picture frames tilted on their own. A glass fell from the kitchen counter when nobody was near it. The hallway lights sometimes came on in the middle of the night. Once, I heard something scratching underneath my bed. Very slowly. 3 scratches. Pause, 3 more. I never looked. People always say you should check, prove there's nothing there. I disagree. There are some things you don't need to confirm. If your instincts tell you not to place your face near the dark gap under a bed, listen to them. The mirror became more difficult to ignore, too. I never saw anything directly in it. But sometimes, while lying with my back toward it, I felt certain the room reflected there was not exactly the room I was inside. I know how irrational that sounds. Still, I could feel it. Almost like having another open doorway behind you. One that leads to the same place, arranged exactly the same way. Except something is standing there that isn't standing here. I began sleeping farther toward the left side of the bed, anything to increase the distance between myself and the mirror. My mother came again last night. The dream began normally. The front door opened. She stepped inside. For 1 second, I felt that warmth spread through the house. Then I saw the blur. The cat shape slipped through behind her. This time, my mother saw it too. I know she did. She looked down sharply. Her entire face changed. I've never seen her look like that. Not while she was alive, not in any dream. Pure anger. She shouted something. I couldn't understand the words. The sound seemed too large for the hallway. Then I woke. I was in bed. The string lights were glowing. My heart was pounding. And something had just climbed onto the mattress. Thump. 1 paw. Another. Then 2 more. I stayed completely still. The temperature dropped. The room became so cold that my teeth started trembling. I stared at the floorboards, not the mirror. I knew immediately that something was different. Usually when the presence came, there was only cold. This time, heat appeared too. Not normal heat. Radiant, powerful, it felt like standing close to an open furnace. The two sensations existed in the room at the same time. cold pressing from one direction, heat pushing against it from another. Then I felt her, my mother. I couldn't see her. I didn't need to. Every part of me knew she was there, and she was furious, not suffering, not frightened. Angry, I heard something that might have been her voice, except it didn't sound the way voices normally travel through air. It was inside the walls, inside my chest, inside the bed frame. A scream without words, a warning. The shadow near the edge of the room shifted. The mattress suddenly rose where the small weight had been, as if whatever stood there had jumped down. Then the mirror made a sound, a soft knock from the glass. I kept my eyes down. Another knock. Then another. The cold moved toward the mirror. The heat followed. For the first time, I understood. I'd spent months thinking the mirror might be the source, that something was trapped inside it, that maybe if I ever looked directly into it at the wrong time, I would see the thing that came through with my parents. I was wrong. My mother wasn't inside the mirror. She was standing in front of it, between the glass and the rest of the room, guarding it, holding something back. The knocking became louder. The glass trembled in its frame. I wanted to look. Every instinct told me not to. My mother's presence grew stronger, and with it came a feeling so clear it might as well have been spoken directly into my ear. Don't. So I didn't. I stared at the floor. The children. That thought suddenly came to me. Their rooms were down the hallway. Their doors were open. My mother wasn't protecting me, not only me. She was stopping whatever had slipped through behind her from reaching them. The cat had never been trying to stay in my room. It had been testing the house, learning the route. Doorway, hallway, children. That's why they sat upright while sleeping. That's why they stared at empty doorways. They could feel it approaching. Maybe they could see it. The mirror knocked again. Then I heard something from the hallway. A tiny sound, like claws against hardwood, moving away from my room, toward the children. The heat exploded. There is no better word. The entire bedroom seemed to fill with my mother's presence. The string lights flickered. Every bulb burned brighter. Something hissed near the doorway, not like a cat. Too deep, too wet. The scratching stopped. Then came a sound from the mirror, a violent impact. The glass didn't break, but the whole frame slammed against the wall. Once, twice, 3 times. I started crying, not from fear, not entirely. I knew my mother was there. Somehow, for however long she could remain, and I understood what she had been doing. Every time she visited, every dream, every doorway, she hadn't been carelessly bringing something with her. She had been trying to keep it from coming through. Maybe it had been waiting on the other side. Maybe it learned that her love for us created a path. Maybe it followed the warmth because it couldn't create a doorway of its own. My parents weren't opening the house to it willingly. They were fighting to close the door before it slipped through. Last night, my mother finally failed. Or maybe it had become strong enough. The thing got fully inside. And now she was holding the line. The cold began to weaken. I noticed it slowly. My hands stopped trembling. My breath became easier. The warmth stayed. The mirror stopped shaking. Then, from the hallway, I heard my youngest child make a small sound. I got out of bed immediately. The warmth moved with me. I still didn't look at the mirror. I stepped into the hallway. My child's bedroom was open. They were sitting upright again, eyes open, staring toward me, or behind me. I approached carefully. "It's okay," I whispered. No response. I sat beside them and touched their shoulder. Their body relaxed instantly. They lay back down without waking. I pulled the blanket over them. When I returned to the hallway, I felt my mother near me one last time. Warm, familiar, then it began to fade. I wanted to speak. I wanted to tell her I loved her. I wanted to ask her to stay. But somehow, I knew asking her to remain would be selfish. Whatever allowed her to come here was also what allowed the other thing through. So I whispered, "It's okay, Mom." The warmth paused, then disappeared. I went back to my bedroom. The room was normal temperature. The mattress was still. The mirror remained to my right. I didn't look at it. I stayed awake until sunrise. This morning, I checked the house. Nothing obvious had changed. The children slept normally after that. No one remembered anything. When daylight finally filled my bedroom, I looked at the mirror. For a second, it looked completely ordinary. Then I noticed 4 marks near the bottom of the glass. Small, close together, like paw prints. They were on the inside, not on the surface facing my room. Inside the reflection. I haven't touched the mirror. I haven't covered it either. I don't think that would help. Tonight, I'm moving the children's beds into my room. I'm leaving every light on. Maybe none of that matters. But I understand the situation better now. The thing I've been calling a cat isn't a cat. It never was. It's something that follows love across whatever boundary separates the living from the dead. Something opportunistic, patient, small when it needs to be, maybe much larger when it doesn't. My parents still visit in dreams. I hope they always will. But I know now that every visit has a cost. Every time they come close enough for me to hear their voices again. Something else hears the door opening, too. Something waiting in the darkness behind them. Something desperate to enter a house full of sleeping children. And my mother, even dead, is still doing what she did her whole life. Standing between us and whatever wants to hurt us. So if I wake tonight and feel 4 little paws walking across the mattress, I won't swing blindly anymore. I won't search beneath the bed. I won't look into the mirror. I'll keep my eyes on the floor. I'll check the children's rooms. And I'll wait for the warmth. Because I finally understand what that warmth means. It means my mother came back. Not to haunt me. Not even to comfort me. She came back to stand guard. For 3 years, I lived in a house about 30 minutes from the nearest town. It was the kind of place where running out of milk meant deciding whether milk was really worth an hour-long round trip. There were no shops nearby, no streetlights once you got off the main road, and barely any traffic after dark. At night, the surrounding fields and trees seemed to swallow everything beyond the reach of the porch light. I ended up there because of an old high school friend. We hadn't spoken properly in years when he suddenly messaged me one afternoon and asked if I needed somewhere cheap to live. At the time, my living situation was terrible, and I was running out of options. He offered me a room for $300 a month. $300. Even back then, that sounded almost suspiciously cheap. I immediately asked what the catch was. He told me there was only one rule. I had to put up with whatever strange things happened on the property. And every once in a while, if he needed help dealing with one of those things, I had to help. That was it. At first, I thought he was joking. Then I assumed he meant normal rural problems. Wild animals, broken pipes, trees falling over. Maybe the occasional drunk wandering onto the land. I didn't understand what he meant by strange things. Not until I moved in. Calling them oddities is probably the best word I have, although even that doesn't really cover it. Some were almost harmless. There was a floorboard that moved around the house. I don't mean it creaked in different places. The actual board moved. It had a dark knot on one side and a split running through the middle, so it was easy to recognize. 1 month, it would be in the upstairs hallway. A few weeks later, that section of the hallway would be perfectly normal. But the exact same damaged floorboard would appear beside the kitchen table. Then it might show up in my bedroom. Then the bathroom. The first time I noticed, I accused my housemate of messing with me. He stared at the floorboard, shrugged, and said, "Yeah, that one does that." I waited for him to laugh. He didn't. That was my introduction to how things worked in that house. Some things simply happened. You learned the rules. You didn't ask too many questions. Other oddities were much harder to ignore. There was the tall man in the trees. I don't want to get into him right now. Then there was the frocking. Definitely not ready to talk about that one yet. The important thing is that by the time this particular story happened, I had already lived there for about a year. I had adjusted. Not completely. You don't get comfortable living somewhere the rules of reality seem unreliable. But you become practical. If a floorboard changes rooms, you don't panic. If the dog stares at an empty corner for 40 minutes, you let him. If your housemate tells you not to look toward the tree line after midnight, you don't ask him to explain. You just listen. My housemate, who I'm going to call Anthony, was unusual even without everything surrounding the property. He was about a year older than me. Tall, thin, lanky enough that most chairs looked too small for him. He could talk for hours if you accidentally mentioned something connected to whatever historical war he happened to be obsessed with that month. One week, everything somehow became a discussion about the Napoleonic Wars. Another month, he wouldn't stop talking about the Eastern Front. You could ask him what he wanted for dinner and somehow end up listening to a 20-minute explanation about supply lines. He wasn't a bad guy, just strange. That probably explained why he managed to live in that house without completely losing his mind. Anthony also had a dog named Pickle. Pickle was friendly, mostly medium-sized, brownish fur, one ear that never stood up properly. He loved food and would happily sell Anthony's soul for a piece of chicken. But Pickle had a habit of staring, not normal dog staring. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and find him sitting perfectly still, looking at a doorway, a wall, an empty chair. Once he stared underneath the refrigerator for nearly 5 hours. I checked. Nothing was under there. Anthony told me never to distract Pickle when he did that. He notices things before we do, he said. I thought he was joking. After a year in that house, I knew better. Across the road from us lived a retired couple. They were probably in their late 60s or early 70s. Nice enough people. Quiet. Polite. The old woman sometimes brought over preserves or vegetables from their garden. Her husband occasionally helped Anthony repair equipment. If I hadn't lived where I did, I never would have considered them unusual. Except for the burn piles. Every couple of months, they'd burn something behind their house. You always knew when they'd started. The smell came first. It drifted across the road and got inside our house, even with every window shut. It wasn't ordinary smoke. It smelled sour. Rotten. The closest comparison I can make is old vomit mixed with wet leaves and spoiled meat. It stuck in the back of your throat. The first time it happened, I asked Anthony what they were burning. He looked toward the window. No idea. Doesn't that bother you? Not enough to go ask. That seemed wise. So I left it alone. Every few months, the smell returned. The couple would burn something for a day, sometimes 2. Then everything went back to normal. This time, however, the gap between burns had been longer. Months, long enough that I noticed. I assumed they'd been away. Vacation, maybe, visiting family. Whatever, then one morning the smell returned, stronger than ever. I woke up with that sour stink already inside the house. Anthony wasn't home. Pickle was asleep under the kitchen table. I opened a window, immediately regretted it. The smell got worse. I shut it again. Eventually, I decided I needed fresh air, which didn't make much sense considering what was outside, but I also wanted a cigarette. I smoked back then. Cheap ones, terrible brand, the kind you buy because you're broke and addicted enough not to care. I grabbed the pack and stepped outside. Smoke from across the street hung low over the road. I could see a darker column rising behind the neighbor's house. I pulled out a cigarette. Need to pick up something better next time I go out. I lit it. The first cigarette of the day always hit hardest, that burn in the throat. The first rush of nicotine. A little dizziness. Normally, it was enough to clear my head. Even with the terrible smell from across the road, I stood there enjoying it. Nothing unusual happened. No voices, no movement in the trees, no impossible creatures. Just a quiet morning. I finished the cigarette. Dropped the butt. Crushed it beneath my shoe. Then turned toward the front door. Something moved near Anthony's car. He owned an old Mitsubishi that hadn't run properly in months. It sat beside the driveway like a piece of abandoned machinery. One tire was almost flat. The hood hadn't been opened in weeks. At first, I thought Pickle had somehow gotten outside. Then the thing moved again. Green. I stopped. A small creature was crouched in front of the Mitsubishi's bumper. It couldn't have been taller than 3 feet. Probably less. Its skin was dull green. Not bright cartoon green, more like damp moss. Its ears were enormous. They hung from the sides of its head all the way down to its ankles. Whenever it shifted, the ears dragged across the ground. Its nose looked like a pig's snout. Its mouth was far too wide for its face. The corners seemed stretched almost to the sides of its head. I stared. The creature hadn't noticed me yet. It seemed interested in something near the bumper. Maybe a bug. Maybe a bolt. I had no idea. My first thought was that I needed to get inside, not run. Running around strange creatures on that property was usually a bad idea. Slow movement was safer. I reached carefully toward the door handle. The creature turned. Its eyes widened. It tried to stand quickly. One of its huge ears caught beneath its foot. The creature tripped. It hit the gravel with a wet-sounding slap. Then, it covered its head. Please don't hurt. I fell backward. Actually fell. My ass hit the porch. For several seconds, I could only stare. The creature slowly lowered its hands. Please don't hurt, it repeated. The voice was unbelievably high, like a cartoon character, or a child sucking helium. I got back to my feet. Did you just talk? The creature watched me. I took one careful step closer. I'm not going to hurt you. It didn't move. What's your name? The creature looked toward the road, then toward the house, then at me again. Its ears dragged behind it. My name, Trash. I blinked. Trash? It nodded. Are you friend? That question caught me completely off guard. Not because it was strange, because it sounded genuinely nervous. The creature wasn't acting threatening. It looked frightened. I stared at it, then at my empty hand. I was suddenly very aware that the cigarette I'd just smoked hadn't been enough. Yeah, I nodded. I can be your friend. Trash seemed to relax, its shoulders lowered, its huge ears settled against the gravel. I reached into my pocket for another cigarette. Trash immediately pointed. Is food? No. I pulled out the pack. It's a cigarette. Food? No, definitely not food. Trash watched as I put one between my lips. I lit it. Its eyes became huge. I took a drag. Smoke left my mouth. Trash leaned forward. I laughed. You want to try? That was stupid. I know that. But I didn't know anything about the creature. It seemed friendly, and apparently, my natural response to discovering a tiny green humanoid in the driveway was to offer it nicotine. I held the cigarette toward him. Trash snatched it so quickly I barely saw the movement. Before I could stop him, he shoved the entire cigarette into his mouth. Wait, don't eat it. Too late. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Trash stood still. Then its body jerked. Its eyes widened even more, and it started spinning. Full circles. Fast, its ears flew outward. Smoke poured from both of them. I mean, actual smoke. Gray cigarette smoke billowed from the tips of its ears while it spun around the driveway, making high-pitched whooping sounds. Whoop, whoop. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Trash suddenly spat the cigarette onto the ground. Nasty smoke. It stomped on the butt. Nasty. Nasty. I was laughing so hard my stomach hurt. Yeah, it is. Trash pointed angrily at me. You eat nasty smoke. I don't eat it. Same. That made me laugh even harder. Trash stared at me. Then its mouth stretched wider. I eventually realized it was smiling. You're a fun little guy, Trash. It held out one hand, 3 short fingers, a strange long thumb. I hesitated for maybe a second, then reached down and shook it. Its skin was cold, slightly damp, almost like touching a frog. Nice to meet you. Trash shook my hand enthusiastically. Friend? Yeah, friend. I smiled. For maybe 30 seconds, that whole impossible moment felt strangely normal. Sweet, even I had made friends with something that shouldn't exist. Then the gunshot cracked across the yard. Trash dropped instantly. I didn't even understand what happened at first. There was a small hole in the side of his head. His body hit the gravel. His ears collapsed beside him. White fluid began pushing from the wound. Not blood, something thick. Slow, stringy, I stumbled backward. What the fuck? Across the road, the old man was approaching. The neighbor. He carried a rifle. He was whistling. That detail still makes me angry. Some cheerful little tune, like he had just shot a rabbit. Thanks for finding this sucker. He smiled. I looked at Trash. Then at him. What? When they get ripe, you've only got a couple days. He knelt beside the body. Need to harvest and cook 'em before they get like this. I couldn't process the sentence. Harvest? The old man ignored me. He placed his rifle on the ground, then shoved both thumbs into the bullet hole. I knew what he was about to do. I still wasn't prepared. He pulled. Trash's skull opened with a wet crack. I nearly vomited. Inside was a large white mass. It trembled slightly. Cream-colored veins bulged across its surface. Some of them pulsed. The old man pushed 2 fingers into it, pinched off a chunk. The tissue stretched, then tore. He held it toward me. A little bitter at this stage, I stared at him, but still good. I shook my head. No, he shrugged. More for me. Then he put the piece into his mouth. Chewed, enjoyed it. I could hear the wet sound between his teeth. He swallowed, smiled, then grabbed Trash by one ear. The body slid across the gravel as he started dragging it toward the road. I stood there, completely shocked. Wait, the old man stopped. He looked back. What? What was that? He glanced down at Trash. This? Yes, this, he shrugged. One of them. One of what? He looked surprised. I needed to ask. Then his expression changed, almost amused. You're new enough. I've been here a year. Still new. He started walking again. I followed a few steps. It talked. So? I pointed at Trash. It spoke English. The old man laughed. Lots of things talk. I stopped. That sentence bothered me more than anything else he'd said. Lots of things talk. Like language didn't mean what I thought it did. Like being able to speak wasn't enough to make something worthy of mercy. The old man continued across the road. His wife appeared beside the burn pile. She wore thick work gloves and an old apron. When she saw what he was dragging, she smiled. You found one? Neighbor did. She looked across at me. Thank you. I didn't answer. The two of them dragged trash behind the house. I stood there until they disappeared. Then I went inside. Pickle was sitting in the hallway, staring directly at me. What? He didn't move. Don't. Pickle tilted his head. I don't need your creepy dog bullshit right now. Still staring. I walked past him. Anthony came home later. He found me sitting on the couch. There was an unopened beer in my hand. I had been holding it for almost an hour. You okay? No, he dropped his keys onto the table. What happened? I looked at him. Do you know what trash is? Anthony stopped moving. That told me everything. You saw one? One? He rubbed his forehead. Shit, your neighbor shot it. Yeah, you know about this? Anthony sat down. Kind of. I stood. He shot something that talked to me, split its head open, and ate whatever was inside. Anthony nodded slowly. Sounds about right. I stared at him. Sounds about right? You're yelling. Of course I'm yelling. Pickle walked into the room. Anthony pointed at him. Pickle doesn't like them. Why is that relevant? He usually knows. Pickle once stared at a lampshade for 3 hours. Exactly, I rubbed my face. What are they? Anthony hesitated. I don't actually know. Great, the neighbors call them trashkin. Trashkin? That's what the old man's father called them. I looked toward the window. Smoke from across the road was still rising. Is that what they burn? Anthony was quiet. My stomach turned before he answered. Mostly leftovers. I sat down. Oh, God. Yeah, so every few months, probably they're burning bodies? Parts, that's worse. Anthony shrugged. Depends what parts. I glared at him. He stopped talking. I thought about the white mass. What are they eating? The head stuff. Brain? Maybe. What do you mean, maybe? Nobody really knows their anatomy. I stared. You've seen more than one? Sure. How many? Anthony thought about it. 10, 12, and the neighbors killed all of them? Most. That word immediately bothered me. Most? Some get away. What happens if they get away? Anthony looked toward the hallway. Pickle was still standing there. Usually nothing. Usually? He didn't answer. I leaned forward. Anthony, you don't need to know everything. I absolutely do. He sighed. Fine, he looked toward the window again. They show up around garbage. Garbage? Rotting piles. Dumpsters. Compost sometimes. That's why they're called trash? No, he shook his head. They call themselves that. I went quiet. Everyone? Everyone I've heard talk. I remembered the creature's voice. My name, Trash. Are you friend? Something twisted in my chest. Why do the neighbors eat them? Anthony shrugged. They say it's healthy. That is the dumbest explanation I've ever heard. I never said I believed it. Have you eaten one? No. His answer came quickly enough that I believed him. Have they offered? Many times. And I prefer chicken. I almost laughed. Then remembered Trash's body. I didn't. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Trash spinning around the driveway. Smoke coming from his ears. Nasty smoke. Then the gunshot. Friend. That word hurt more than it should have. I knew the creature for maybe 10 minutes. Still, he trusted me. And because he stopped near our house, he died. Around 2 in the morning, I heard scratching. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I opened my eyes. The sound came again. From my window. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. I slowly sat up. Scratch, something moved behind the glass. Green, I froze. A trashkin was clinging to the outside wall. Its long ears hung beneath it. Its hands gripped the siding. Its enormous mouth pressed close to the window. It looked at me. Then raised one finger. Pressed it against its lips. Shh. I didn't move. It pointed toward the neighbor's house. Then toward the trees. Then toward me. Its mouth opened. I couldn't hear through the glass. It repeated itself. I leaned slightly closer. The words were easy enough to understand from its mouth. Friend come. My hand almost moved toward the window latch. Then I stopped. That house had taught me one important thing. Doors and windows mattered. Invitations mattered. Helping one strange creature could sometimes let something much worse inside. The trashcan watched me. Its eyes looked almost disappointed. I'm sorry, I whispered. It probably couldn't hear me. The creature stared for a few more seconds, then began climbing down. Its ears dragged against the siding. Soon it disappeared. The next morning, I told Anthony. His reaction wasn't reassuring. That's weird. What is? They don't usually climb houses. Fantastic, and they don't normally come back right after one is harvested. Even better. Anthony looked concerned. What does that mean? Probably nothing. I've lived here long enough to know that probably nothing means something terrible. He didn't argue. A week later, the neighbors burned another pile. The sour smell lasted almost 2 days. I stayed inside. I stopped smoking on the porch. Eventually, the property returned to normal, or whatever normal meant there. The floorboard appeared inside the bathroom. The tall man stood near the trees twice. Pickle spent most of one afternoon staring beneath the refrigerator. Anthony became obsessed with the Battle of Verdun and talked so much about artillery that I considered moving out purely for that reason. Life continued. But I never forgot trash. I lived in that house another 2 years. Some of the things I experienced there were incredible. Not every oddity was dangerous. Some were beautiful. Some were funny. There are things I genuinely miss. Others, I would erase them from my memory if I could. The frocking is one. The thing beneath the old well is another. Then there was the winter, when the tall man stopped staying near the tree line. And the night, Pickle finally barked. I don't think I'm ready to talk about those yet, but trash was different. Trash changed how I saw everything on that property. Before him, the oddities were just strange events. Things, problems, rules, something moved. Something appeared. Something needed to be avoided. Trash had a personality. He was afraid. Curious, funny, he wanted a friend. That made the other things harder to ignore afterward. If Trash could think and feel, maybe other creatures could too. Maybe some of the things we'd treated like animals understood us completely. Maybe some hated us. Maybe some were terrified of us. And maybe some simply wanted to exist without being eaten by an elderly couple across the street. Eventually, the neighbors moved away. That happened during my 3rd year. They didn't explain why. A moving truck came. They packed quickly. The burn piles stopped. For the first time since I'd moved in, that sour smell disappeared completely. The house across the road remained empty. Then, on my final night living with Anthony, I saw another trashcan. I was loading boxes into my car. It was close to midnight. Anthony was inside. Pickle sat on the porch watching me. I heard movement near the ditch, grass rustling. Then a small voice. Friend? I stopped. A green face appeared between the weeds. Long ears, wide mouth, another trashcan. Maybe the same one from my window. Maybe not. It stayed hidden. I didn't approach. Neither did it. We looked at each other. Then it pointed toward the neighbor's empty house. Friend gone. I didn't understand whether it meant trash, the old couple, or something else. I'm leaving too. The creature tilted its head. I pointed toward my packed car, going away. Its face lowered slightly. For some reason, I felt guilty. I reached into my pocket out of old habit. The trashcan noticed. Food? I laughed. No, then it seemed to remember something. Smoke? I shook my head. No smoke. I had quit by then. The creature smiled. Good, I laughed again. Yeah, good for a few seconds. Neither of us moved. Then it disappeared into the tall grass. That was the last trash can I ever saw. Maybe that's why I needed to tell this story before the others. It wasn't the scariest thing that happened during those 3 years. Not even close. But it was the first time I realized the impossible wasn't necessarily evil. Sometimes the impossible was just alive. Sometimes it was small and weird and green. Sometimes it tripped over its own ears. Sometimes it tried a cigarette and hated it. Sometimes it shook your hand and called you friend. And sometimes the most frightening creature in the situation wasn't supernatural at all. Sometimes it was an ordinary old man walking across the road with a rifle. I haven't smoked in years. But occasionally, if someone lights a cigarette nearby, I remember that morning. I remember Trash spinning in circles, smoke pouring from his ears. Nasty smoke. For a second, I still laugh. Then I remember the gunshot, the white fluid running from his head, the sound of his skull being pulled apart. And I don't laugh anymore. I still don't know exactly what Trashkin were. Anthony never gave me a better explanation. Maybe he genuinely didn't know. Maybe he knew more than he admitted. That was common with him. He believed information could be dangerous. Sometimes I thought he was paranoid. After everything I saw in that house, I'm not sure anymore. All I know is that for 3 years, I lived somewhere the world felt unfinished. Like reality had been built correctly everywhere else. But around that property, somebody had forgotten to tighten a few screws. Things slipped through. Rules changed. Animals looked into empty corners. People learned not to ask certain questions. Some mornings it was terrifying. Other mornings it was strangely beautiful. And every once in a while, you'd step outside for a cigarette and find a 3-foot-tall green creature named Trash standing beside a broken Mitsubishi. That was just life there. I know I'll have to tell the other stories eventually. The tall man, the frocking, the well, Pickle, all of them. But for now, I think this one is enough. Because out of everything I saw in those 3 years, Trash is the thing that taught me the lesson I still haven't forgotten. When something impossible appears in front of you, don't immediately ask whether it should exist. Ask what it wants. Ask whether it's afraid. Ask whether it understands you. And if it reaches out its hand and asks if you're a friend, maybe think carefully before deciding what kind of person you're going to be. For most of my life, I believed I was a good person. Not perfect. I never thought of myself that way. But fundamentally good. I chose psychology because I looked at the world and saw people hurting everywhere. Depression, addiction, violence, trauma passed from parents to children, then from those children to their own families. I believed that if I spent my life understanding the human mind, maybe I could help repair at least a small part of that damage. That was the story I told myself anyway. I thought I was compassionate, patient, ethical, someone who could be trusted with another person's most fragile thoughts. The last few years have forced me to reconsider all of that. Now, when I look at myself clearly, I see something much more selfish. And if there really is a hell, I have no doubt that somewhere inside it there is a place waiting specifically for people like me. I should make one thing clear before I continue. This is not an apology. I'm not writing because I expect forgiveness. I'm not even asking anyone to understand. I know what I have done is wrong. I know what I continue to do is wrong. There are professional codes for people like me, ethical rules, legal boundaries, basic human lines that should never be crossed. I crossed all of them. Deliberately, the guilt is real, but it isn't stronger than what I feel for her. That is the ugliest truth in this confession. If someone forced me to choose again, knowing everything I know now, I am not certain I would make a different decision. That is how much I love my first wife. I met her when we were children. Her family moved to the city where I lived with my parents, and she was placed in my class. I can still remember the first day I saw her. She was sitting 2 rows ahead of me, trying to sharpen a pencil with one of those tiny plastic sharpeners that always broke after a week. The blade came loose. Graphite and little curls of wood spilled onto her desk. She looked around, embarrassed. I laughed. She glared at me. That was our beginning. Not romantic, not magical. Just 2 children in a classroom. We became friends gradually. For years, that was all we were. Friends, we grew up together. Different classes sometimes, different interests, different social groups. But somehow, always close. I realized I loved her long before she felt the same way. I didn't tell her. I was terrified that saying it aloud would destroy the friendship I already had. So I waited. Then we ended up at the same university, both studying psychology. Even now, I think there was something beautiful about that. 2 people who had known each other since childhood, suddenly sitting in lecture halls together, learning how memory works, how trauma reshapes behavior, how emotion changes perception. She struggled more than I did with certain exams. Or maybe she pretended to. Sometimes I still wonder. She started asking me to help her study. Those study sessions became late nights in my dorm. Late nights became mornings. Coffee, books, notes spread across the floor. Her falling asleep against my shoulder. Me pretending not to notice because I didn't want the moment to end. Her feelings for me appeared slowly, like a flower opening after sunset. One night, while we were supposed to be studying developmental psychology, she looked at me and asked why I had never kissed her. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. That was the beginning of the happiest period of my life. By the time we finished university, marriage felt inevitable. Not rushed, not reckless. Simply the natural continuation of a story that had started when we were children. Our wedding wasn't enormous. We didn't need it to be. I remember standing beside her and thinking that every person around us was witnessing something they could never fully understand. They could see a bride and groom. I could see the girl with pencil shavings on her desk, the teenager who had called me after her first heartbreak, the university student asleep beside my psychology notes, my best friend, my wife. For the first 2 years of our marriage, I genuinely believed no one in the world could be happier than I was. We both found stable jobs in psychology. I went into family therapy. She chose criminal rehabilitation. I hated that choice. Not because I thought prisoners couldn't be helped. I believed the opposite. But I worried constantly. Some of the people she worked with were violent. Some had committed terrible crimes. Some had serious psychiatric conditions. I asked more than once whether she could work somewhere safer. She always gave me the same look. The look she had used since childhood whenever I tried telling her what she should do. She was brave, stubborn, determined to help people everyone else had given up on. I loved her for that, even while it terrified me. Then came the Tuesday that divided my life into before and after. We ate breakfast together. Nothing unusual. Coffee, toast, a rushed conversation about the day ahead. Normally, I arrived at my office long before my first client. I liked having time to organize paperwork, review notes, and sit quietly before anyone arrived. That morning, my wife asked me to stay. Just a little longer. I don't remember exactly why. Maybe she wanted company. Maybe she felt tired. Maybe she simply didn't want breakfast to end yet. I told her I couldn't. I had work. I kissed her. I left. For years afterward, I tortured myself with that moment. What if I had stayed? 5 minutes, 10, 20. Would she have left home later? Would she have missed the confrontation? Would some other small event have changed the timing enough to keep her alive? People who understand grief academically can still become completely irrational when grief belongs to them. I knew all the terminology. Survivor's guilt, counterfactual thinking, traumatic bereavement. Knowing the names didn't make any of it easier. She never came home. A corrections officer made mistakes restraining a violent prisoner. During a rehabilitation session, something was said. I was never given a version of events that satisfied me. The prisoner attacked my wife. She had sharpened a toothbrush into a weapon. She stabbed her repeatedly in the abdomen. By the time medical help reached her, there was nothing anyone could do. I didn't get to say goodbye. That part still feels impossible to write. One morning, she was sitting across from me eating breakfast. Hours later, she was gone. No final conversation. No last look. No hand to hold. Nothing. I hated the prisoner. I hated her with a violence I had never known existed inside me. I imagined what I would do if I ever stood in the same room with her. I thought of her as filth, a disease, a piece of human cruelty that had destroyed the best person I had ever known. Years later, I would recognize the hypocrisy in that hatred. At the time, I didn't. After my wife's death, I stopped living in any meaningful sense. I continued breathing, continued eating enough to stay alive, continued occasionally speaking to people. But the world became colorless. There is a particular cruelty in losing someone who has been part of your life for almost as long as you can remember. You don't only lose the person, you lose versions of yourself. The child who knew her, the teenager who loved her secretly, the student who stayed awake beside her, the husband who assumed there would be decades ahead. All of those versions died too. For years, grief was the only emotion I trusted. Anything pleasant felt like betrayal. If I laughed, guilt followed. If I enjoyed food, guilt. If I slept well, guilt. Pain became proof that she had mattered. I became addicted to it. That probably sounds strange coming from a psychologist. I understood what I was doing. I simply didn't want to stop. If the pain disappeared, what remained of her? That was how I thought. Eventually, I learned how to function again. From the outside, people assumed I had healed. I returned to work. I met clients. I gave advice. I helped couples repair relationships, while my own life felt like a machine operating without anyone inside it. Friends encouraged me to date. For a long time, I refused. Eventually, mostly because I was tired of people worrying about me, I agreed. I met women, nice women, intelligent women, kind women. Every time, some part of me compared them to my wife. They always lost. Then I met the woman who became my second wife. She was completely different. That may have saved the relationship at first. There was less to compare. She had also been married before. Her ex-husband had cheated on her with one of his students. She worked as a teacher and had a young son. She was practical in ways my first wife never had been. Less impulsive, less romantic, more direct. When she was angry, she said it. When she was happy, she didn't hide it. We dated for 7 years before getting married. 7 years. That matters. This wasn't some meaningless relationship I entered while secretly waiting for my dead wife. I cared about her. I still do, in whatever broken way I am capable of caring. Her son became mine in every way that mattered. I helped him with homework, taught him to drive, attended school events, argued about curfews, sat outside his room when he had his first serious breakup. He called me Dad once by accident when he was younger. I pretended not to notice because I knew acknowledging it might embarrass him. Inside, I nearly cried. My second wife gave me happiness again. Not the same happiness. Nothing could replace what I'd lost. But something new. A life I hadn't expected to have. The grief from my first wife never disappeared. It simply learned how to share space with everything else. For years, I believed that was enough. Then, my stepson invited several friends over for a sleepover. Teenagers do stupid things when they're together. They challenge each other, tell ghost stories, try things they don't actually believe because they want everyone else to think they're brave. One of the boys brought a Ouija board. My stepson later told us they had been joking. None of them genuinely expected anything to happen. They turned off most of the lights, lit candles, placed their fingers on the planchette, asked whether anyone was there. At first, nothing, then it moved. They accused each other of pushing. The usual thing. They asked for a name. The planchette began spelling. My first wife's name. My stepson knew that name. Of course he did. He knew about my past. He had seen photographs. He knew how she died. According to him, the game stopped being funny immediately. He asked questions. The board responded correctly to things his friends shouldn't have known. Eventually, he became angry. He assumed one of them had researched my first wife and was using her death as some cruel joke. He ended the session. He stopped speaking to at least one friend afterward because he became convinced the boy had been controlling the board. When he told us what happened, my second wife and I supported him. We said he'd done the right thing. I gave every rational explanation I had. Ideomotor effect, subconscious movement, expectation, group influence. Everything psychology can offer to explain why people believe boards like that communicate with the dead. I believed those explanations. Mostly, but somewhere deeper inside me, something else whispered. What if? I hated that question. What if it really was her? I tried ignoring it. For several days, I succeeded. Then, the thought started becoming intrusive. What if she had been trying to reach me? What if the children had accidentally opened something? What if death wasn't as final as I had spent years forcing myself to accept? I knew better. I was trained to know better. But grief is older than education. Love is older than reason. One afternoon, I was alone in the house. My second wife was working. My stepson was out. I took the board from where they had stored it. I placed it on the dining table, sat down. For several minutes, I did nothing. I almost put it away. Then I placed my fingers on the planchette. Are you here? Nothing. I felt ridiculous. I asked again. Movement, slowly, yes. My heart began pounding. Who are you? The planchette moved, letter by letter, her name. I cried before it finished. That night, I spoke to my dead wife until morning. I know what you're thinking, I know. I'm a psychologist. I understand confirmation bias, dissociation, automatic movement, wish fulfillment. I know how badly the human brain wants to build patterns around grief. But she knew things, private things, moments from childhood, jokes no one else knew, details from our university nights, things I had never written down, never told anyone. I asked questions designed to prove it wasn't her. She answered. Again, by sunrise, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day she died. Joy, not relief, not nostalgia. Joy. She was back. Not physically. That was the problem. We talked for months. Every opportunity I had alone, I used the board, sometimes for minutes, sometimes hours. I became obsessed. At first, I told myself it wasn't cheating. How could it be? My first wife was dead. There was no physical contact, no secret hotel room, no living woman. But emotionally, I was absolutely unfaithful. My second wife began noticing. I became distant, less patient, less affectionate. My stepson noticed too. I stopped asking about his life, stopped caring about family dinners, stopped being present. Everything became an interruption between me and the next chance to communicate with her. My first wife and I talked about the past, then the present, then what we wanted. The separation between us became unbearable. She couldn't touch me. I couldn't hold her. Sometimes I would sit in the same bedroom we had once shared, place my hand on the mattress where she used to sleep, and cry while the planchette moved beneath my other hand. My second wife started confronting me. We argued. She accused me of withdrawing. She asked whether I was having an affair. I told her no. Technically true, morally false. The fights became worse. My stepson began spending more time away from home. He told me once that I had changed. I barely listened. All I could think about was the woman on the other side. Then, one night beneath a clear sky that reminded me painfully of our university years, my first wife and I found a solution. Possession, I should explain something about hypnosis. People misunderstand it. Movies make it look like mind control. Swing a pocket watch, say a phrase, and suddenly someone becomes your puppet. Reality is more complicated. A person's mind has defenses, patterns, self-concepts, memories, expectations, but those structures aren't as permanent as people think. Human identity is fragile. We like believing there is a solid, unchanging self somewhere inside us. There isn't, not in the way people imagine. Suggestion can alter memory. Repetition can create certainty around false events. Emotional conditioning can connect fear to things that once felt safe. Isolation can weaken confidence. Sleep can lower resistance. A skilled person can do enormous damage without ever touching someone violently. I knew that. I had been trained to protect people from that kind of damage. Instead, I used my knowledge to create it. I inverted everything I had been taught. I stopped being a therapist. I became a butcher. My second wife needed to become weak enough. That was what my first wife told me. A spirit could not simply take control of a healthy, resistant mind. The living person's will needed to be weakened, suppressed, made uncertain. Sleep was helpful. Deep trance was better. I told myself I wouldn't hurt her. That's how evil usually begins. Not with someone deciding to become a monster, with someone creating a definition of harm narrow enough to excuse what they want. I started small. Comments, comparisons. I mentioned friends of hers casually. How well they dressed. How confident they seemed. How successful their marriages looked. I never directly criticized my wife. That would have been obvious. Instead, I planted insecurity and let her grow it herself. Then I became inconsistent. Warm one day, cold the next. Affectionate in the morning. Distant by evening. Whenever she asked what was wrong, I said nothing. When she stopped asking, I suddenly became loving again. She started watching me constantly, trying to predict which version of me she would get. Then came the lies. Small at first. I changed details about conversations. She would remember me saying one thing. I insisted I'd said another. I moved objects, denied moving them. I told her she'd forgotten plans we'd never actually made. When she became frustrated, I acted concerned. Are you feeling okay? That sentence became one of my weapons. Eventually, she started doubting herself before I even contradicted her. Then I began the hypnosis. She trusted me. That is the part that should damn me more than anything else. My wife trusted my professional knowledge. When I suggested relaxation exercises to help her sleep, she agreed. Why wouldn't she? Her husband was a psychologist. Her husband loved her. Her husband would never use therapy against her. I guided her into trance. At first, the suggestions were mild. Sleep deeper. Relax faster when hearing my voice. Trust my instructions. Let difficult thoughts drift away. Session after session, I strengthened those responses. Sometimes I worked with her while she was barely awake. Other times, while she slept. I created triggers, deepened suggestibility, encouraged dependence, reduced resistance. Months passed. The woman I had married began disappearing. She became anxious. Quiet, she apologized constantly. She looked at me before making simple decisions. What to eat, what to wear, whether she could leave the house. I never explicitly told her she needed permission. I didn't have to. By then, she had learned. My stepson confronted me. He asked what I was doing to his mother. I told him to mind his own business. He said she was afraid of me. I denied it. He called me a monster. I slapped him. Once, hard a moment afterward, I knew something inside our family had broken permanently. He stared at me, not frightened. Disgusted, then he left. His mother begged him to stay. He didn't. I didn't stop him. I wish I could tell you that losing him made me reconsider everything. It didn't. By then, my goal was close. My second wife's sense of self had become thin. Fragile, there were moments when she would stare into space for several minutes, and afterward not remember what she had been doing. Sometimes she woke at night confused about where she was. Sometimes she called me by my first wife's name and then apologized, even though she had no idea why she'd said it. That was when we knew the time had come. My first wife and I planned everything, late at night. The same hour when my second wife was usually deepest in sleep. I placed the Ouija board beside the bed. I put my wife into trance, deeper than ever before. I told her she was safe, that she didn't need to hold on to anything, that she could rest, that someone she trusted was coming. Her breathing slowed. Her face became peaceful. I touched the planchette. Are you ready? Yes, the room became cold. Not ordinary cold, the kind that seems to happen inside your bones. My second wife inhaled sharply, then stopped breathing for maybe 5 seconds. I panicked. I nearly ended everything. Then she inhaled again. Her body arched. Her fingers tightened around the sheets. Her head turned toward me, eyes still closed. Then she smiled. I knew that smile. 20 years could not have erased it. I started crying. Her eyes opened. Not my second wife's eyes. Not the expression behind them. Her, my first wife. Hello, she whispered. That was the happiest moment of my life. That sentence should disgust me. It does. But it is still true. She sat up, touched my face. For the first time since her death, I felt her hand. Technically, it was another woman's hand. I know. I understand exactly how horrifying that is. But the gesture was hers. The pressure of the fingers. The way her thumb moved beneath my eye. The slight tilt of her head. All hers. I held her. I sobbed against her shoulder. She kissed me. And for several hours, I forgot that another person had been sacrificed to make that reunion possible. Possession isn't perfect. My second wife isn't gone. Not completely. She returns, usually during the day. Sometimes for a few minutes. Sometimes longer. The first time it happened, she woke in the kitchen. She looked around, then at me. Her face filled with terror. What did you do? I told her she had been sick. She didn't believe me. She remembered pieces. Dreams, she called them. Another woman speaking through her mouth, watching me touch her body while she screamed from somewhere deep inside. She tried to leave. I hypnotized her again. Now I maintain the conditioning constantly. Nights are easier. My second wife becomes weakest when she's tired. That's when my first wife comes forward completely. Those are our hours. We sit outside beneath the stars, we talk. Sometimes we recreate our college study nights. Books around us, coffee, old music. She jokes that she finally doesn't have exams to worry about. I laugh. I almost feel young again. Sometimes, while she rests her head against my chest, I can forget where the body came from. Almost, my stepson hasn't returned. He calls occasionally. Never me. He tries reaching his mother. Sometimes she answers during one of the periods when my second wife is present. Those conversations are difficult. She cries, begs him to help. I usually end the call. Eventually, he stopped calling as often. I do feel guilty about him. I was his father in every way except biology. He trusted me. Then, he watched me slowly destroy his mother. I know what that will do to him. I know because I am professionally trained to understand exactly what that kind of betrayal does to a young person's ability to trust. That knowledge hasn't stopped me. This is why I started by saying this isn't an apology. An apologetic person stops. I haven't. My first wife is here tonight. I can hear her downstairs. She is making tea. Or perhaps my second wife's body is making tea while my first wife controls it. Language becomes difficult when you live like this. Sometimes I wonder whether my first wife truly is the spirit I contacted. I didn't question it at first. I wanted her too badly. But there are little differences. Small things. She remembers our childhood, our university years, our marriage. She knows things no one else should know. Yet sometimes she says something that doesn't sound like her. She has become more possessive, more cruel. When my second wife emerges unexpectedly, the other presence gets angry. Once, my second wife regained control while we were sitting outside. She screamed, begged me to call police. Then her body began shaking. Her mouth opened. Two voices came out at once, one crying, one laughing. I held her until my first wife returned. Afterward, she asked why I had looked frightened. I lied. Recently, she started asking about my stepson. Not kindly. She wants him to come home. She says families should be together. I keep telling her no. That is one boundary I haven't crossed. Yet, sometimes she becomes very quiet when I refuse. Then, she smiles. You'll understand. That sentence frightens me. I shouldn't be frightened of her. This is what I wanted. I created all of this so we could be together. But there are nights when my second wife sleeps, and I hear someone moving through the hallway even though the body is beside me. There are moments when the Ouija planchette moves while nobody is touching it. Sometimes it spells names I don't recognize. Sometimes dozens. Last week, it spelled the name of the prisoner who killed my first wife. I hadn't thought about that woman in years. I checked online. She died in prison several months ago. No one told me. I don't know what that means. I asked my first wife. She only smiled. You always wanted justice. I haven't asked again. There are other changes, too. My second wife looks different when my first wife is in control. Not dramatically. If you saw her on the street, you'd still recognize the same person. But when I look closely, I sometimes see features shifting. The expression around the mouth, the angle of her brows, the way she carries her shoulders. Sometimes, for 1 second, I see my first wife's face, not superimposed, not imagined, actually there. Then it disappears. I should be terrified. Instead, I find myself hoping the changes continue. Maybe possession isn't the final stage. Maybe the body is adapting. Maybe eventually she won't just control it. Maybe it will become hers completely. That thought brings me comfort. It should not. My colleagues have noticed things. I've reduced my practice significantly. I couldn't continue treating people while doing what I was doing at home. The hypocrisy became almost comical. A couple once sat in my office discussing emotional manipulation. The wife described how her husband made her question her memory. I nearly vomited. Every technique she described was something I had done deliberately. I referred them to another therapist afterward. Eventually, I stopped seeing most clients. I tell people I'm semi-retired. That's easier. I spend most days at home now, monitoring my wife, maintaining trance states, keeping my first wife present. Sometimes my second wife becomes stronger. Those days are exhausting. She fights. She leaves notes for herself. The first one I found was hidden beneath the bathroom sink. It said, "If you wake up and he says you were dreaming, don't believe him." I burned it. Then another appeared. "He did this to you. Then call your son. Then you ARE still here." That one bothered me. Not because it was wrong, because part of me had been pretending she wasn't. I showed the note to my first wife. She read it, then laughed. She's persistent. There was no sympathy in her voice. My first wife had been compassionate when alive. That was one of the things I loved most about her. She believed violent criminals could be rehabilitated. She died because she tried helping one. Would that woman laugh at someone trapped inside their own body? I don't know. I have started wondering whether death changed her, or whether the thing I invited was never her at all. That possibility appears more often lately, usually during the day. At night, when she comes to me and puts her head against my chest, doubt becomes much harder. She knows how to calm me. She knows every memory, every private detail. Sometimes she repeats sentences my first wife said decades ago. How could something else know? Then I remember what I taught my second wife about suggestibility. The mind is fragile. Memory can be changed. Identity can be constructed. And I find myself wondering whether spirits can do the same thing. What if something learned my wife through me? What if every Ouija conversation wasn't with her, but with something studying my memories? Something slowly building a personality I would trust. It would explain why she became more perfect over time. The first conversations were awkward, then more natural. Eventually, she sounded exactly right. I had assumed that was because communication between worlds became easier. Maybe it was practice. I can't follow that thought too far. If I do, everything collapses. And I'm not ready for that. Because if she isn't my first wife, then what have I done? I destroyed a good woman, drove away a boy who loved me, abused everything I knew about psychology, abandoned my professional ethics, turned my home into a prison, all for something wearing the memories of a dead woman. I cannot accept that. So I choose to believe. That is the confession beneath the confession. A psychologist should care about truth. I don't anymore. I care about the version of reality that lets me continue. Tonight is beautiful. Clear sky. Almost no clouds. Exactly like those nights at university when my first wife and I stayed awake, pretending we were studying. I can hear her calling me now. My name. Same rhythm. Same warmth. She says the stars are out. She wants me to come sit with her. My second wife hasn't appeared at all today. That should concern me. Usually she surfaces at least once. Maybe she is getting weaker. Maybe soon she'll disappear completely. My first wife says that's good. She says the body is finally accepting her. I asked whether it hurts the other woman. She looked at me as if the question was childish. Does the caterpillar hurt when the butterfly emerges? That isn't something my first wife would have said. At least I don't think so. But memory is unreliable. I know that better than most. I should stop writing. She's calling again. There's something strange about her voice tonight. It sounds slightly farther away than usual, almost like it's coming from outside or downstairs. No, both. I can hear my wife downstairs calling my name, And at the same time, I can hear someone whispering from the bedroom behind me. My second wife's voice. Very weak. Please don't go. I haven't turned around. The woman downstairs is laughing now. Softly, she says I'm taking too long. The voice behind me is crying. I suppose this would be the moment when a good man finally understands what he has become. The moment when he chooses to stop. Calls the police. Calls his stepson. Gets help for the woman he destroyed. Faces whatever consequences are waiting. Maybe another version of me would do that. The man I once believed I was probably would. But I already told you, this is not an apology. My guilt has never been stronger than my love, or my obsession, whatever word is more accurate. She is calling me again. She wants to see the stars. Just like we did when we were young and procrastinated over exams in my dorm room. I can almost picture her waiting outside. The girl from school. The student I fell in love with. The woman I married. My wife. So I am going downstairs. And if the voice behind me really belongs to the woman whose body I stole, I hope one day she can forgive me. Because I know I never will. And still, I am going. Something came out of the darkness. At first, I thought it was only a shadow shifting between the trees. Then, I saw the eyes. They weren't glowing. They weren't white or red or anything dramatic like that. They looked almost normal, which somehow made them worse. Two eyes staring at me from inside a shape I couldn't understand. I could tell something was moving through the trees, but I couldn't make out its body. The darkness around it seemed too thick, almost like the night had gathered itself into one place and decided to move. Then I heard the footsteps. They sounded like a deer running through heavy brush. Branches snapping. Leaves being crushed. Rapid movement. Except the shadow wasn't running. It was moving toward me slowly. Steadily, one careful movement at a time. The sound didn't match what I was seeing. My brain kept trying to connect the two things and failing. Fast footsteps, slow body. Fast footsteps, slow body. I stood frozen. I don't know how long. Maybe 3 seconds. Maybe 30. Fear destroys your sense of time. The thing continued coming closer. The eyes never looked away from me. Then a thought appeared inside my head. Not exactly my own thought, more like a whisper. Run, I couldn't move. Run, my legs felt useless. It can't end like this. My heartbeat became painfully loud. Your life can't end like this. The shadow moved again. A branch cracked somewhere to my left. Then the whisper became a scream. Run. Something inside me broke. I turned and ran. I have never moved that fast in my entire life. I didn't know my body was capable of it. Branches hit my face. Thorns scratched my arms. I nearly fell twice. I didn't care. I could barely see where I was going. The only image in my head was my house, my patio, my front door, the warm light from the kitchen window. Everything normal that I had been stupid enough to leave behind. I kept imagining myself reaching it, opening the door, locking it, calling someone. Anyone I didn't look behind me, I could still hear the footsteps. They seemed to come from everywhere, running through the woods. Fast, too fast. But every time I caught the slightest movement from the corner of my eye, the shadow still seemed to be moving at the same calm pace. That made no sense. Maybe it didn't need to run. Maybe the sound wasn't coming from its feet. I don't know. I just kept moving. Then I saw light, a small flash between the trees. At first, I thought I'd imagined it. Then it appeared again. Headlights, a road, a car. Hope hit me so hard that I almost started crying. Help. My voice came out broken. I pushed through the last stretch of brush and stumbled toward the road. Help, please. The headlights turned slightly. The vehicle slowed. The driver had seen me. I waved both arms. Stop. The car screeched. I ran toward the passenger side without looking back. I didn't care who was driving. Police officer. Drunk serial killer. At that moment, anything seemed safer than whatever was behind me. I grabbed the passenger door handle. Locked, please. The driver looked at me, then unlocked it. I threw the door open and fell into the seat. Go. Please, just go. He pulled away. I slammed the door and twisted around. The road behind us was empty. Just darkness, trees, nothing else. I pressed my back against the seat and tried to breathe. I'm sorry. The words came out between gasps. There was something in the woods. I don't know what it was. The driver said nothing. It wasn't a person. Still nothing. It sounded like a deer, but it wasn't an animal. At least I don't think it was. I wiped sweat from my forehead. It was following me. The man kept both hands on the steering wheel. Thank you for stopping, sir. Seriously, thank you. He nodded once. That was it. No questions. No surprise. No expression. That's when I actually looked at him. He appeared to be somewhere in his mid-40s. Brown beard. Athletic build. He wore a black shirt underneath an open red striped overshirt. Nothing especially strange about him, except for how calm he was. Way too calm. Imagine picking up a stranger in the middle of an isolated forest road near midnight. They're covered in dirt, sweating, possibly bleeding. They're screaming about something chasing them through the trees. Wouldn't you ask what happened? Wouldn't you at least look concerned? This man drove like I'd simply asked for a ride. My fears started changing. I had escaped one unknown thing. Maybe I'd climbed into a car with another. The interior of the vehicle was extremely clean. No wrappers, no bottles, no personal items. The dashboard looked almost untouched. I glanced backward, hoping to see the license plate through the rear window somehow. Too dark. What did I just get myself into? Neither of us spoke for several minutes. The road stretched ahead between trees. No other cars passed us. Eventually, the man spoke. How big was it? I looked at him. Sorry, the entity you saw. Entity, that word immediately bothered me. Not animal, not person, not attacker. Entity, how big was it? He repeated. His eyes remained fixed on the road. I don't know, I swallowed. Maybe 6 feet? He nodded slowly. 6 feet. Why? No response. Do you know what it was? He kept driving. Sir? No worries. His voice was smooth. Calm. We are heading to the first ranger office. We'll discuss everything there. I should have felt relieved. Part of me did. Forest ranger office. Good people, phones, maybe police. Someone who could explain what was happening. Still, something bothered me. He had asked exactly how tall it was. He had called it an entity. And he didn't sound surprised. They know something. That thought came quickly. Then another. What if there is no ranger office? I stared out the passenger window. Trees moved past. Every few seconds, I saw my own reflection in the glass. Pale face, wide eyes, sweat-soaked hair. I looked terrified. The driver looked completely normal. That almost made him more frightening. Eventually, he turned off the road. The car followed a narrower path between the trees. No sign, no lights. Ranger station is out here? Yes, his answer came immediately. Too immediately. The road became rougher. Then a building appeared ahead. A cabin. At least it looked like one. The driver parked. No exterior lights were on. The windows were black. The entire place looked abandoned. This is the ranger office? He got out. I remained inside. He opened my door. Come, something in his tone made refusing feel dangerous. I stepped out. The air smelled strange. Not smoke exactly. Something cooked. roasted meat. The smell was faint but unmistakable. I looked toward the dark cabin. My instincts told me to run. Again. But where? Back into the forest? The driver walked toward the door. I followed because I didn't know what else to do. The door opened before he reached it. A second man stepped from the darkness. He looked younger, maybe late 20s or early 30s. But something about him made me stop. The clothes. Dark shirt. Red striped overshirt. Similar build. Similar face. Not identical. But close. Too close. It looked like someone had taken the driver and aged one version by 15 years. The younger man looked at us. "Hello, gentlemen. Can I help you?" His voice was harsh. Raspy, the driver stepped forward. "Hello, I'm John." At least now I had a name. I was driving and crossed paths with this young man. He pointed toward me. He was frightened, standing on the road between Rollins Peak and Cherokee Peak. The younger man's eyes moved toward me. He says something dark, around 6 feet tall, followed him through the forest tonight. The two men looked at each other. Something passed between them. Recognition, I'm certain of that. And something else. Excitement. They were happy. The younger man looked at me again. "Did it say anything to you?" My stomach tightened. I don't know why that question frightened me so much. Maybe because the thing hadn't spoken aloud. But there had been a voice inside my head. "Run. Your life can't end like this." Run, was that the creature? Was that me? I still don't know. But when he asked if it had spoken, every instinct told me to lie. "No." My voice shook. "No, sir." The younger man watched me closely. I forced myself to continue. "I'm really tired." I tried smiling. "Is there somewhere I can sleep tonight? I'll leave first thing in the morning." Neither man answered immediately. That gave me time to look around. There was no ranger equipment. No radios, no maps, no emergency supplies, no uniforms, no government signs. Nothing. This wasn't a ranger station. It was a house, a cabin in the middle of the woods, and I had voluntarily walked inside with two men who looked like the same person from different years of his life. My breathing became shallow. I backed toward the front door. Neither stopped me. I reached for the handle. Turned it. Locked. I pulled harder. Nothing, how. Nobody had gone near it. I hadn't heard a lock. I hadn't heard anyone turn a key. Opened the door. Neither man moved. "Please, the older one, John, simply watched me." I pulled the handle again. Locked. My heart was beating so hard that I started feeling dizzy. Where am I? The room seemed to tilt. What is this place? The younger man smiled. Not widely. Just enough. I backed into the wall. "Who are you?" Neither answered. My vision blurred. The smell of roasted meat became stronger. For one horrible second, I thought I saw something hanging in the darker part of the cabin behind them. Something long, human-sized. Then everything went black. I woke to birds. That was the first thing I heard. Birds calling somewhere outside. Then, wind. A soft morning breeze moving through leaves. I opened my eyes. Sunlight, I was lying on a wooden floor. For a few seconds, I couldn't remember where I was. Then everything came back. The creature, the car, John, the younger man. I sat up quickly. The cabin was empty. Not empty because the men had left. Empty, completely abandoned. No chairs, no tables, no lights, no signs anyone had lived there in years. Dust covered the floor. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling corners. Some sections of the wall were rotting. I slowly stood. "Hello?" My voice echoed. Nothing. I moved toward the front door. Unlocked, I opened it. Morning light flooded inside. The car was gone. No tire tracks that I could clearly identify. No footprints, nothing. I stepped outside. My clothes were soaked with sweat, completely drenched. Yet the morning air was mild, maybe around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Not hot enough to explain it. I turned in a circle. Trees everywhere, no road immediately visible. No people, no sign, nothing. Then another realization hit me. My phone. I didn't have it, because I'd left it back at my tent before any of this started. I remembered placing it beside my sleeping bag. I wanted to get away from screens for the night. One quiet evening outdoors. That's what this trip had been supposed to be. I almost laughed. Instead, I started asking myself the questions I should have been asking from the beginning. What was that thing in the woods? Why did John know to call it an entity? Why did the younger man ask if it spoke to me? Who were they? Why did they look so similar? Why had the cabin changed? And where the hell was I now? I searched around the building. Nothing useful. No food, no water, no phone, no vehicle. I considered waiting. Maybe someone would come. Then I remembered the two men. I didn't want them coming back. So I started walking. I picked a direction. That was it. No compass, no map, no plan. I simply moved. My body hurt. My throat was dry. I hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon. Every few minutes, I looked behind me. Nothing followed. Still, I couldn't stop expecting to see those eyes again. The forest looked normal in daylight. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Every dark space between the trees looked like somewhere the shadow could be waiting. I kept thinking about home, my stupid desk job, the apartment I complained about, my boring morning routine, coffee, emails, traffic, things I had treated like problems. I would have given anything to be sitting at that desk again. I walked for hours. At least, it felt like hours. The terrain changed gradually. The trees thinned. Eventually, I found a trail, a real trail. I followed it downhill. Then I saw pavement through the trees. A road. I almost cried. I stumbled onto it. No traffic. Still, a road meant people, eventually. I chose a direction and kept walking. My legs felt heavy. My stomach cramped from hunger. The sun rose higher. At that point, I wasn't even thinking about rescue anymore. I was just moving because standing still felt worse. Eventually, I saw a sign, a nearby town. The distance wasn't huge. I don't remember the name now. That's strange. I know I read it. I know I followed the arrow. But when I try to recall the letters, my mind gives me nothing. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe something else. I walked toward it. By then, I looked terrible. Mud on my clothes. Sweat dried across my skin. Scratches on my arms. Hair tangled. My mouth felt like sandpaper. I started passing signs of civilization. A fence. A mailbox. Then houses. Old ones. The town seemed small, very small. No modern buildings that I could see. No gas station. No police station. Just a few houses and shops spread along one road. Then I noticed a teenage boy. He was standing near the sidewalk watching me, not casually. Staring, I probably looked like I'd survived a plane crash. I walked toward him. My legs were barely steady. I forced a smile. Hello, he kept watching. I'm Ben. I wiped my mouth. I got lost last night. I don't have my phone. The teenager smiled. Howdy, sir. Something about the way he said it sounded old-fashioned. Maybe that was just the area. Where can I get some help? He pointed down the street. Let me show you the way to our local diner. A diner? Yeah, he started walking. We don't really have a police station here, but they'll help you. That seemed strange, but at that moment, food and a telephone were enough. Thank you. My voice barely came out. I followed him. The town was quiet. Too quiet. People watched from windows. Whenever I looked directly toward one, curtains shifted. I told myself that was because of my appearance. A dirty stranger arriving from the woods would attract attention anywhere. The teenage boy walked several feet ahead. "What's your name?" I asked. He glanced backward. "Tom." "Thanks, Tom," he nodded. "Where am I?" Tom slowed. "What do you mean? What town is this?" He stopped completely. Then he looked at me with an expression I couldn't understand. "You don't know?" "No." For a few seconds, he said nothing, then smiled again. He really did get lost. He continued walking. I didn't like that answer. The diner appeared near the center of town. Small building, large front window, an old sign above the door. Several people sat inside. I should have felt relieved. Instead, something about it reminded me of the cabin. Not visually. The feeling. That strange certainty that I had reached somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Tom opened the door. A bell rang. Every person inside stopped talking. Every head turned toward me. The silence was immediate. I stood in the entrance. Tom smiled. Found someone on the road. An older woman behind the counter stared at me. Her face went pale. A man sitting near the window slowly placed his coffee down. Nobody spoke. Then the woman asked, "Where did you come from?" "The forest." That was apparently the wrong answer. Several people looked at each other. Same recognition I'd seen between John and the younger man. My stomach tightened. I got lost. The woman kept staring. "Which forest?" "I don't know." I laughed nervously. That's sort of the problem. Nobody laughed. Tom closed the door behind me. I heard the lock click. My body immediately tensed. "Why did you lock that?" Tom looked confused. "We always lock it." "In the morning?" Nobody answered. I backed toward the door. The woman raised one hand. "Easy. I just need a phone. We can help. Then give me a phone." She glanced toward someone in the kitchen. A man disappeared through the swinging doors. "What happened to you?" I didn't want to explain. Then I remembered John's question. How big was it? The younger man's question. Did it say anything? Maybe these people knew too. I looked around the diner. Something chased me last night. Silence. "What?" The woman leaned forward. "What kind of something?" I couldn't see it clearly. I regretted saying anything immediately. It was dark, around 6 feet. The man's coffee cup slipped slightly in his hand. Nobody missed it. I looked at him. "You know what I'm talking about." "No, yes you do." The woman spoke quickly. "Did it speak to you?" There it was again. Same question. My skin went cold. I backed into the door. Why does everyone keep asking me that? Nobody moved. Who are you people? The woman looked genuinely afraid now. Not of me. For me. Or maybe of something I had brought with me. "Young man, listen carefully. My name is Ben." "Ben?" She nodded. "Did the thing say your name?" I thought about the voice. "Run. It can't end like this. Your life can't end like this. No name." "No. Did it tell you to follow it?" "No. Did you answer anything it said?" I don't know if it actually spoke. The woman closed her eyes. Around the diner, people became restless. Someone started whispering. Then another person said something that made my blood freeze. He came from the ranger house. I turned. "How do you know that?" The speaker was an elderly man sitting in a booth. He had not looked at me until then. Now his eyes were fixed on my clothes. "Smell." "What?" "You smell like it." Roasted meat. The cabin. I suddenly smelled it too. Faintly, on my shirt. The diner woman stepped around the counter. "You need to sit down." "No, please. I need a phone." "You can't call anyone yet." "Why?" "Because if you've been marked, calling home is the worst thing you can do." Marked, my chest tightened. What does that mean? Nobody answered quickly enough. I reached for the lock. Tom grabbed my wrist. I pulled away. Don't touch me. He immediately raised both hands. Sorry, I am leaving. The woman shouted, Ben, if you leave this building before we know what followed you, you may lead it straight to whoever you love. I stopped. The diner went silent again. The words hit exactly where she intended. My parents. Friends. Home, I slowly turned. What followed me? Her face changed. Sadness, recognition, fear. We don't know what to call it. That wasn't comforting. But you've seen it? She nodded. Not all of us. The old man in the booth did, 40 years ago. Everyone looked toward him. He stared through the window. It moved slowly. My mouth went dry. But it sounded like it was running. I couldn't breathe. He finally looked at me, and the eyes were the only part you could really see. I sat down. My legs simply stopped supporting me. The old man continued, You were lucky. I laughed once. It sounded insane. Lucky? He nodded. It didn't catch you. I thought about John, the cabin, the identical men. I'm not sure I escaped. Nobody disagreed. That was when I understood that finding the road hadn't ended anything. Getting into the car hadn't saved me. Waking in daylight hadn't saved me. Even reaching a town wasn't safety. I had only moved from one part of whatever was happening into another. And everyone here already knew more than I did. The woman brought me water. I drank almost the entire glass at once. Then she gave me food. Eggs, toast. I barely tasted any of it. After I ate, I asked for the truth. Nobody wanted to give it. Finally, the old man spoke. People disappear between those peaks. Rawlins Peak, Cherokee Peak, the same names John had used. How many? Enough that thing takes them? Sometimes. He looked toward the diner door. Sometimes something else finds them first. I remembered the BMW, John's calm face, the younger version of him waiting at the cabin. 2 men? The old man's expression tightened. What men? I described them. Brown beard, red striped shirts. One older, one younger, nearly the same face. The old man stood so quickly his chair scraped backward. Lock the back door. Someone ran toward the kitchen. The woman whispered something I couldn't hear. What? Nobody answered. What are they? The old man stared at me. You got in their car? Yes. You entered the house? I thought it was a ranger station. His face became gray. Did they ask if it spoke? Yes, and what did you say? I lied. For the first time since I entered the diner, someone looked relieved. The old man sat down again. Good. Why? Because if you'd told them the truth, you wouldn't have woken up. That didn't make sense. I didn't hear anything. He watched me carefully. Are you sure? I didn't answer. The little voice. Run, the scream. Run, I had assumed it was my survival instinct. Maybe it wasn't. I looked toward the locked front door. What happens now? The old man gave me an answer I still think about. Now we find out which one of them believes you belong to it. I stared at him. Outside, somewhere down the quiet street, a car engine started. Nobody in the diner moved. Then Tom whispered, They're here. And through the front window, I saw a black BMW turn slowly onto the road.